Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for coming down for the last session of the day. We appreciate your attendance. My name's Gerard, and I'm CEO of the Food, Fibre and Timber Industries Training Council. And I also have with me Diane Smith, and Diane is a project manager at the Training Council. And today we're talking to you about STEM skills and manufacturing. So just for everyone's information, we also have some people participating via webinar. So welcome to those in the regional areas. So that makes it a little bit more interesting. Okay, what is STEM? And I'm not going to go through it because I assume that you all know what STEM is. But in October last year, we had a workshop called STEM Skills in the Workplace. And the reason we had that workshop is we were noticing that there was more and more technology being used in our industries. And that technology was requiring a new lot of skills. And at the workshop, we had a faculty manager from Curtin talk about STEM skills. We had an agricultural scientist show us the latest drone technology and some of the new science in agriculture. And we had a cabinet making enterprise show us some of the equipment that he was using in his business. And we were blown away by the level of technology and the level of new stuff. And what it made us think about was what actually happens with STEM skills in a vocational point of view, because a lot of people always think STEM skills is higher education. But STEM skills is in every industry, from hospitality to manufacturing to agriculture to all sorts of things. So, and by the way, we were going to change it to STEAM because it is now STEAM skills. They've added arts in the STEM thing, but we still kept it at STEM. So it's science, technology, engineering and maths. And these are some of the areas that they actually cover. And so, as I said, all of those areas come under the food, fibre and timber industries. So that's what STEM is. Also, what else is STEM? And I've got this, by the way, this PowerPoint and also all of the reports that we refer to are actually all going to be on the VetInfoNet website at the end of the session. So there's a report that's been put out. It's called The New Basics. And it's been put out by an organisation called the Foundation for Young Australians. And the Foundation for Young Australians is actually a not-for-profit organisation that's all about social change. And they've done a series of reports, and this is their second one. And what they did is they actually analysed 4.2 million jobs between 2012 and 2015 from 6,000 different sources. And they put them all into fields, and they did some analysis of what the actual jobs were what the employers were after. And what categories, so they put them in like job title, occupation, whatever. And all of the employers were after enterprise skills. Now in vocational land, we could call these probably a bit of employability skills, a bit of soft skills, but all of the jobs were saying, the employers were saying, we want these skills. So these are actually STEM skills. So even though you don't actually equate them with science, engineering, technology or maths, those areas actually foster all of those sorts of things. So they're transferable skills, and I suppose they're classed as soft skills. Now in the education curriculum, they try and put some of those things in the way they deliver their curriculum. But in the vocational world, we seem to focus more on the technical skills rather than the soft skills. So, and the employers are saying that there's a huge rise for these sorts of things. Now, obviously, you can sort of see digital literacy would be pretty well a standard thing for any new job in now and the future. Everyone needs to understand digital literacy. And digital literacy isn't just about computers and whatever, it's about social media, it's about apps, it's about communicating electronically, it's lots of sorts of things. But most important, what sort of seemed to be really rising was this whole critical thinking and creativity. And again, so if you go back to the STEAM, where they say arts is now part of the STEM skills thing. But I suppose, I'll give you an example. The other day I was at a meeting with my chair, actually, who has a furniture making and a forestry business out at, Byford. I've just gone blank. And Carlo was actually commissioning a new piece of equipment that he'd bought from Italy. And he was Carlo's with me in Osborne Park, and he's on the phone to a fellow out at Byford who's on a phone to a guy in Italy, and they're trying to commission this piece of equipment. And it was all about problem solving, because the guy in Byford couldn't understand what the guy in Italy was saying. They were actually communicating via Skype. They were using live interaction between the piece of the equipment and the guy in Italy, and there was all these sorts of things. And I thought, wow, isn't that a perfect example of STEM skills and soft skills and creativity? The guy that was actually on the phone to the guy in Italy also had problems with his phone because it kept cutting out. And this guy is known, and it was, yeah, anyway, Carlo knows this fellow because he employs him, and he said this guy is no good at thinking outside the square. He's really pragmatic. And the only reason this guy was doing it was I was with Carlo and he couldn't do it. So, you know, I sort of went back and I thought, well, the fellow that's actually on the phone to Italy needs to have problem-solving skills, he needs to be creative, he needs to be able to communicate well, he needs all those sorts of things. And I thought that was a really good example of STEM skills. So I suppose when you go back to critical thinking, the critical thinking really is the ability to be able to think outside the square. It's also the ability to be able to actually sort of, okay, what's the problem? And I don't know if you've heard the term root cause analysis, but root cause analysis is really when anything goes wrong, you actually look at where it comes from, and then you look at where it's gone and you follow it down until you actually come to the crux of the matter. Well, that's creativity, and that's also critical thinking. So these employers, out of those 4 million jobs or whatever, were all saying that critical thinking and creative thinking is something that they really need to have. Another reason that we've been concerned about this is, and again this is also from this same report, is about the changing needs of jobs and the growth in these enterprise skills. So as you can see from the graph, it's pretty well 50-50. In most industries, employers are now valuing soft skills or the enterprise skills as much as technical skills. Now in vocational land, we actually teach technical skills. So we teach someone how to do something, we put the steps on how to do it, and at the end of it, we work out whether they've done it properly. So we don't really put in the ability to be able to problem solve or the ability to be innovative. And I think Nigel mentioned this morning in that panel that we don't cover innovation very well in the vocational sector. So, and as you can see, from an employer's point of view, in some areas, they actually value enterprise skills more than technical skills. And I know myself, I think if I can talk to someone that's got attitude and the ability to be a bit creative, I actually could teach them the technical skills myself. Now another report, which is this one, was put out by PwC, and they analysed they did a lot of modelling, and they looked at the jobs of now, and then they looked at the jobs of tomorrow, and they worked out that the majority of jobs and these sorts of things are all going to be automated in some form or another, maybe not fully automated, but out of all those careers, technology is going to replace the worker in some form or another. Now we already know, I haven't seen them actually out in Perth yet, but there's automated trolleys. So there's trolleys that you can take to a supermarket, and as you put your grocery in, it tallies it up, it works out how much you've paid, and they've been trialled in other places. The reason they're not out apparently is the batteries run flat on the trolleys, and they haven't worked out a way that in the supermarket they can charge those batteries. But what they're saying is what they might do is get your phone to actually link up to the computer on the trolley, and then you can have all your shopping done and it tells you where things are and stuff. But anyway, but we also have point of sale systems now that count stock, order stock, replace stock, do everything. And we also have integrated finance. So now you can actually get your credit card stuff automatically downloaded through MyOb. So again, you don't need as many bookkeeping services because it can be done all electronically. So the changing nature of jobs, and we know in the manufacturing sector, we've seen traditional roles in a lot of the businesses just aren't there now. So you very rarely get someone who is making a piece of furniture the same way as they used to make it 20 years ago. So the changing the nature of jobs in the manufacturing sector is huge. Another report, which I haven't got because it's 161 pages and I didn't want to print it out, is the Office of the Chief Scientist, and that's the name of the report. And again, it'll be on the website at the end of the thing. So, I mean, I won't read all of those because you can read them yourself, but I will mention the first one. STEM qualifications are valuable to the workplace even when their major field of study is not a prerequisite for their role. Recently, the weed industry did a report on careers and everything within the weed industry. Anyway, they were saying they didn't really care if the university graduate had a qualification in agriculture. They didn't mind if it was economics or business or whatever. What they wanted a higher level person who had been taught how to do research, how to think creatively, and how to sort of problem solve. So they were saying they don't really care what sort of university qualification the person has. It's those other skills that they actually value. So STEM skills, and again they're saying 49% of employers expect an increase in the needs for STEM skills in the future.
The purpose of our research was just to understand the demand for science, technology, engineering and mathematics skills in cabinet making, identify any new emerging tasks, and determine how prepared the workforce is to meet these requirements, and then make recommendations when necessary that support any changed training needs. So what we did, we set up a steering committee. So we had industry stakeholders from the Cabinet Makers Association, the Australian Furniture Association, the WA Furniture Manufacturers Association, the Australian Workers Union, and South Metropolitan TAFE, because they're our key training provider. So we set the steering committee up, we developed a survey, 20 surveys, one was done online, two were done online actually, but one was incomplete. So essentially I had 19 surveys. There was 8 micro-businesses being those businesses that employ less than 5, 3 small, 8 mediums between 20 and 199. Okay, so all the respondents operated in the kitchen and bathroom manufacturing sector or the commercial office fit-out sector. And some were specialised in bespoke furniture. Okay, so how we structured the survey was to ask businesses about the actual job roles of employees rather than ask them about the occupations. We thought we'll ask them about the actual job roles, so what the guys were doing. And we asked questions like, we asked them about their skill shortages for a start, whether they had a preference for qualifications, whether they saw there'd be a demand for higher skill levels in the next 5 to 10 years. And then we asked them specific questions about workplace skills, and these were your STEM skills and your enterprise or soft skills. And then we asked about emerging job roles. So the job roles, this is the results in terms of the job roles. So this covers about 371 employees across the 19 businesses we surveyed. So most of them have assemblers, most of them have installers, CNC, CAD-CAM, and your mobile plant operators as well. Quite a few production managers as well, so we've got about 11 there out of the 19, mainly in the medium-sized businesses, so those of 20 or more employees, and also supervisors. So we'll see as we go through this the different skill needs of each of the different levels of employees in the workplace.
Cabinet making post-school, does that include the CAD-CAM design and the CNC machine operating, or is that a separate qual?
Yeah, no, it's actually within the qualification itself. So it is touched on in the qualification. I guess the purpose of this research was to see if there was enough training done in that area to meet the needs of the industry currently. We did ask them if they had any skill shortages, and they said yes, we've got a few. Not as many as what there was about 2 or 3 years ago when we had the mining boom. There are still shortages of installers, wood machinists, assemblers, CAD/CAM operators, designers, CNC robotics operators. And a lot of the reasons for those difficulties are because of a lack of skill and recruiting the right person. Installers particularly, employers want experienced cabinet makers to do the installing because it can get there's so much detail gets involved in installing a kitchen. Also asked them about qualifications, what their preferences were when they were recruiting people, whether they wanted qualifications. As you can see, 37% said don't care if they've got a qualification or not, as long as they can do the job. 41% said, yep, vocational qualifications are great. 20% said secondary quals are enough, and 2%. So there's a small number of tertiary quals, and that's probably more in the IT software area where they want the qualifications, and that's in the bigger organisations that have got up to 80 to 100 employees. Okay, so the actual qualifications of those people in the workforce that we surveyed, so installers and assemblers, CNC, CAD/CAM, wooden machinists, most of them have got qualifications. Over 80% got vocational qualifications.
And most of that would be at an apprenticeship level?
That'd be your
trade qualification.
Yeah. So although only 41% say vocation was good, 80%, over 80%, installers and assemblers have a cabinet making qual. Now, do they think they're going to need higher level skills and qualifications in the next 5 to 10 years? 50-50. It depends on the job role. So CNC robotics, over 50% said yes. CAD/CAM, yes. Installers, 50-50, 50% said yes. Some 40% said stay the same. Supervisor and production managers, over 50% said yes, we're going to need higher level skills for these job roles. And a lot of them said stay the same. A lot of the skills will stay the same, particularly for your polishers, your wooden machinists, assemblers, admin staff, and your store people, mobile plant operators. Okay, the next slide, this is where we get into the actual skills in the workplace. So we asked the question, do you believe there's going to be an increasing importance of reading and writing in the workplace? And this is what they said. They said 90% of the designers will need an increase in reading. Because the blue bars are reading, the orange bars are writing. So 90% of the survey respondents said designers are going to need an increasing need for reading. Production managers, over 80%. CNC, CAD/CAM. Supervisors, you can see there's a bit of a theme happening here. You've got your designers, your production managers, CNC robotics, CAD/CAM, supervisors, those higher level type job roles. Whereas your assemblers, installers, wood machinists and polishers, which are your traditional trade areas, probably not so much. The importance of STEM skills, so the importance of science, technology, engineering and maths skills in the workplace. Blue is your science, so for us we said science was about sustainability, clean, green production, carbon neutrality, that type of stuff. For technology, it's like analysing information, CAD/CAM sort of operations, mobile apps and platforms, using those sorts of things. So for us, when we talked about STEM, we didn't talk about STEM qualifications like your science qualifications or your biology or those types of things. We talked about the actual applied skills in the workplace. So the maths, when we asked them about maths, we said, what about, do they need, is there an increasing importance of maths in the job roles today or in the future? And those things like, cutting lists, machine optimisation, getting the best out of the machine, that type of thing. So you can see technology, very high for your CAD/CAM, very high again for admin, designers, CNC robotics, up there around over 70%. Said yes, there's increasing importance. for technology. Any questions on that graph? Is it fairly self-explanatory? Maths will always be important in cabinet making. And then we looked at enterprise skills. So there's things Kay was talking about, innovation, problem solving, research and analysis. And with all these new materials and technologies, research analysis is really quite important. So in terms of innovation, increasing importance for production managers, CNC robotics, supervisor, CAD/CAM, again, there's a bit of a theme happening here. Designers. Wood machinists are a funny one because a lot of the organisations, a lot of the businesses are using wood machinists on their CNC operations areas, and they're more or less the same type of skills. They're using machinery to cut, cut materials and things like that. So innovation, not so important for installers, assemblers, admin staff and your store, mobile plant operators or your polishing. Research and analysis, designers, 100% said designers need to be good in the research and analysis. So what sort of innovation and research are they doing? Well, it's all about software, it's all about new materials, new machining methods, new work processes, new technologies, new material. There's so many new materials out there and different types of lighting and better technologies that are going into kitchens right now that it's very exciting. Very exciting industry to be in. We did ask them about emerging skills and job roles. Because we surveyed a lot of smaller businesses, there's not one assembler or three assemblers, and there's not one CNC operator. There's a lot of multi-skilling that's happening in these smaller businesses. So a lot of the smaller businesses were wanting more multi-skilled cabinet makers. So guys that can operate a CNC machine, that can go out and install, that can assemble, that can do the bit of a CAD/CAM as well. Project management is another big one. So it's organising the kitchens when they get installed and managing the whole kitchen operation, and of course social media, web-based marketing. So again, this is just the raw data. We haven't done a hell of a lot of analysis, but what we can say is that we have a strong training culture out there in the cabinet making sector. So industry values the qualification, and they value trained staff, and they want trained staff, and they want TAFE to provide it. There's going to be a demand for higher level skills and qualifications for your CNC robotics, your CAD/CAM, supervisors, production managers and designers. And there's going to be increasing need for higher level skills. Yeah, it's due to all the new technology, new materials, new work processes. There's not a lot of wood being used out there. It's all these new composite materials. There's an increasing importance of reading and writing, STEM skills and enterprise skills. And there's a lot of talk about installers, because installers are the ones that have got to put all this new technology into that house or that building. And they need a lot of problem solving skills, because a lot of the times the walls don't line up like they're supposed to. And I think that's it from me. I think Kay was just going to finish off.
Yeah, I suppose. Okay, so I'm just going to go back to why we did this.
Unless we've got any questions for me.
We can still have questions. I'll just finish. So basically what we're doing from here is we've done the research. Well, we've started the research. We've nearly finished it. We haven't analysed it. We haven't sort of said where to from here. But from a vocational point of view, one of the things we wanted to look at was, so is the current delivery of apprenticeships and traineeships meeting the STEM skill needs? And as Diane said, at TAFE colleges, they're using a lot of wood. They're doing quite a lot of very conservative type of design, and even though they do have CNC and CAD machines, they probably don't have the really large ones. So at the moment, if you looked at the actual apprenticeship footprint, it's probably not really meeting the needs of the industry for today, and certainly it's not meeting the needs of the industry for tomorrow. Yet the businesses value it. So, you can't say, oh, well, we'll get rid of the apprenticeship because they value that trade. And then how can industry and training providers work together? Now, it's very hard for an RTO when you don't have access to a lot of this new equipment. It's very expensive. It changes overnight in some areas. And as I suppose from an industry from a whole vocational sector point of view, And even if you're not delivering in manufacturing, how do you as an RTO, or how can the sector actually meet these STEM skill needs? And there's lots of talk statewide and strategically wide about technology and how the vet sector keeps up to date with technology. So that's, we haven't answered the questions, but we've got
The steering committee will.
We've got questions, and I suppose then the other thing is, you know, how do we embed things like creativity? And I know I put a LinkedIn comment about this a while back, and someone from RTO land said, oh, creativity is not something you can assess. You can't actually assess critical thinking. Well, if you can't assess critical thinking, or if you can't teach critical thinking, I think something's wrong. So how do we actually get that in the curriculum, and how do we get it into training packages? And then are there skill sets that could be developed? So, you know, you might have someone who's got a cabinet making qualification, but we've given them some upskilling so that they can actually adapt to this new technology. And again, it's not just cabinet making, every industry has technology, and every industry has this to grapple with. So that really that's where we're at. We haven't, as I said, we haven't finished the project yet. We've certainly got a lot more work about how, as a training council, we can influence the training package development and also the delivery of the apprenticeship and traineeship. By the way, the RTOs are on board with this. They think that this is a great project so that it can form their delivery as well. So it's not just an industry, it's an industry RTO sort of approach. As an RTO, who is actually grappling with how do you deliver to your technology needs? Like who's thinking about this, or has anyone got any new technology that they're finding it difficult catering for? This piece of equipment, the guy that owns it, well actually it's not, but he's got a piece of equipment like that. As he said, if it breaks down, the people in his workplace can't fix it. It has to be fixed remotely, or he has to bring in specialists. So all of these people that are trained in the vocational sector can't actually fix the equipment. So there's a question, there's a conundrum of, well, should we be actually training them to fix the equipment? Shouldn't we be teaching them on how to look at the problem, to be able to investigate the problem, to be able to come up with some potential solutions? That's what we're talking about. So we can't ever teach them how to fix the piece of equipment because it's high tech, but we can teach them how to approach the problem.
I'm actually a boiler maker. Been teaching for about 11 years now at a private RTO. Going back to your question about do we teach this stuff here, I only do Cert 3. So we don't even go anywhere near this stuff. That's the Cert 4 stuff. So we need to teach all the guys how to do their hand skills before they can even go to that. But coming back to me, that's a TA's job. That's a TA's job. So it's actually not upskilling, it's actually downskilling. Because we get
The
rid of all the
CNC
guys.
operator?
He's a operator. It'll all come from, the way I see it, from a CNC operator, the CAD programmer. Then it'll come down to him on the floor. He'll just go, what's next in line? He'll go and then I'll go cut it all out for him. He'll just stack it off the side. That's me, that's downskilling.
Yes. Yeah, for the CNC operator? Yeah. That's one of the roles, yeah. And that could perhaps be a Cert 2, and this is something we'll have to discuss in the steering committee. But the other areas, CAD CAM, I say 3 above.
When I went and did that, that was on top of my certification, but you still needed to get in the fabrication, you still had to do your 73 points before you could go to do the Cert 4. So
do
you
your
still
trade
had
first.
to do it. And that's the problem I'm actually sort of hearing everybody sort of saying. But we're trying to jump to the higher level, but we haven't learned how to do the other stuff underneath. I notice the OSHA's doing that as well. They're coming in through the back door, not teaching us how to do the job, but we're supposed to be safe. But we don't know how to do the job.
Absolutely.
The guy that has this machine, he says he wants a licensed tradesperson operating that machine, yet the actual person operating that machine is only using probably 20% of his actual skills. But if that machine breaks down, that licensed tradesperson can't fix it. It has to be, that licensed person, that person needs to be able to understand basics of the trade so that he can advise how to fix it.
Yeah, you probably would need to find out what's actually breaking down. Is it the cutting heads that are falling apart?
Yeah,
I'm
you
not
need some
talking-
fault finding skills.
But I'm not
or something
talking
like
about.
that.
So
yeah.
I'll give. But
Yeah, I know, you're talking about actually fixing it, but you'll find that's electronics.
Yeah.
Another field, it'll be under warranty, they won't let you
But that's
touch it
something that the
anyway.
vocational system has to address, because we're getting more businesses that are using high technology where we're not able to fix things.
Yeah.
You know,
Well,
and
they're not
that's
gonna
what.
let you fix it because it's theirs.
Yeah. Anyway, that's I think that's the conundrum the vet system has, is the more technology we get, how are we actually going to? Like, I've got a board member who has a huge piece of equipment. He reckons that we should be teaching more generic stuff. And so if someone's got good general skills, then they'll be able to actually have a better understanding. He doesn't think that we should be actually putting people into slots. Because anyway, so that's his point of view. So that's some of the conversations.
I sort of agree with that, because I actually think the installer guys, they go out there, measure all the job up, take all their templates, come back and make the job. So they do all their templates, come back, and then they feed that back up to the other guys so they can make it properly. So they don't have to do all the thinking on the job and modification while it's there. They do it beforehand.
Yeah. And we've got a question down the front here.
Cheers. Yeah, I just wanted to know, when you're interviewing the employers, do they talk about a possible integration of the vendor-specific training? We've seen some of this stuff, they can't fix it themselves, things like that.
Yeah.
Do they talk about getting training from the manufacturer, and then
Yeah, they do.
is there a possibility of integrating that into the apprenticeship?
They did, and we asked that question for emerging skill needs. Are your needs being addressed? How are they being addressed? And a lot of them are saying we get the manufacturer comes in and does the training on the job. Or they'll move people around, or they get somebody else on the job to teach.
The problem being with that, and not so much in, because I wasn't involved in these questions, but like in the agricultural industry, when they buy a new harvester, they get trained by the manufacturer to ride that harvester, which is high tech. But then the person that's actually been taught then has to teach someone else. And it's like Chinese whispers, so by the time it's got down to 4 people, the actual level of training isn't as good. And so there isn't, and this is again, is that a vocational sector problem, or is it so that's something that I think
It can also be very expensive
So,
to get the manufacturers back in to train.
Yeah, I'm from a different training council, and one of the sectors I look after is utilities. So we see the same sort of thing in the utilities, and if I pick on like the water sector, a new asset will come in place. Like you say, one person or whoever's on site at the time, they'll get the training from the manufacturer.
Yeah.
And then, a similar problem in that how do you ensure the
As soon as
integrity
he
of
leaves,
that?
he takes the skills with him.
Exactly, yeah.
That means we've got the manufacturer.
And as I said, I think that's a thing that the sector has to take into account now, because there's going to be more of this big equipment that is going to be so specialist that only some people can teach you, and then you've got to be able to pass that skill to all of your workforce and other parts of the workforce. And that's, as I said, that's something I think the sector needs to address. And just for your information, the State Training Board at the moment has a project around technology to address these sorts of issues that they're looking at. So, and that's not just for that's for all industries. So, all right, well, are there any further questions? Well, thanks very much for participating. As I said, all of these reports will be on the website. There's lots of research out there for STEM skills. So, it's all there. And thank you very much, and have a nice night.
Authorised by the Government of Western Australia, Perth.